our topic today is where comfort ends, transformation begins. This whole month we've been talking about divine discomfort, and let me tell you, I know what that's about right now. So life is full of things that we can't control. Life is full of that discomfort, that divine discomfort, and it all depends on how we look at it. So this month we're exploring lessons learned from being uncomfortable and how releasing the need to be comfortable allows space for that transformation to take place. So as we open ourselves to the vision of a world that works for everyone, things are going to change. I'll be a little uncomfortable. Maybe you will be too. That's where the transformation begins. So what I know is that the power to transform my life lies in my willingness to step outside of my comfort zone, someplace I really don't want to go. But in order to grow and to be my best self, I have to embrace the unknown, to embrace the discomfort and discover incredible growth and fulfillment. And so that's our topic for today. Take action today and unlock the limitless possibilities that await you on the other side of that discomfort. Well, Science of Mind emphasizes the power of living outside your comfort zone as a means of personal growth and spiritual evolution. And we all know this comfort zone represents a state of familiarity and routine where we think we know what's going on, we feel safe, secure. But along with that, sometimes there comes the experience of stagnation and a limited expansion. And so when we step outside of that, we open to the new experiences, the challenge, the opportunities for self-discovery. And this act of stretching beyond the familiar allows for that transformation, that expanded awareness, and something that we've always been looking for, maybe an unrealized, untapped potential. And it seems to me like maybe that's why we're here. So living outside the comfort zone. Well, I've heard that it fosters resilience, adaptability, and the development of new skills. I'm encouraged to confront my fears by this and my limiting beliefs. Even though I keep thinking that I've got there, there's always more to overcome, more self-imposed limitations. By embracing the discomfort and uncertainty, then I can expand my perspective, right? Deepen my understanding of myself and the world, and cultivate a greater sense of confidence and self-mastery. So that's why I want to step out of my comfort zone, but there's lots of reasons why I don't. Maybe you can identify with some of those as well. For example, it's uncomfortable. It's a stretch. If I step outside my comfort zone, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what other things are going to come up, but who knows what will happen. So I like to stay in my comfort zone, and I got really used to that while we were on lockdown. It's like, oh, I'm comfortable in this little place, this little time, this space. And so now learning to stretch again is a stretch. But living outside the comfort zone involves confronting that fear and the resistance. And that fear acts as a barrier to personal growth. And stepping outside can help me overcome that fear. So I'm willing. And sometimes the best I can do is to be willing. So managing that fear and embracing the discomfort, that's a necessary part of the growth process. Ernest Holmes in the Science of Mind textbook says, fear brings limitation and lack in its wake and destroys the happiness and possibility of a greater degree of livingness to those who suffer from it. Fear blocks the more complete givingness of spirit to its highest form of manifestation on this planet, humankind. And so if I want to grow, then I have to be willing to let go of the fear. I know a book several years ago, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I don't know what the book said, but I know the title. Isn't that the case sometimes? We know what the title said, and that's really the affirmation that we needed. So Annette White tells us each time you try something for the first time, you'll grow. A little piece of the fear of the unknown is removed and replaced with a sense of empowerment. Oh, yes. And it's that keeps me moving on. So it's important that we expand our boundaries and seek new experiences outside of the familiar routines. I mean, this is why people go on extreme vacations or excursions where they see something new, and maybe it's extreme, maybe it's the bungee jump, or maybe it's just watching somebody else bungee jump. But it's a new experience outside of the familiar. And stepping outside the comfort zone leads us to increased self-confidence. And we learn how to solve other problems and have a broader perspective on life. I remember one time when I felt extreme confidence, but it was right that moment after I had climbed a shale hill, which I was sliding down most of the time and had to keep going up. And by the time I reached the top of that, well, that is the expression that I see with arms upraised and looking up. That's what feeling I had when I did that. Now, it wasn't something I'd planned to do. It was kind of, I got lost and then had to climb this hill, but it was great. I just remember that feeling of exhilaration being at the top of the hill. Ernest Holmes tells us this. He said, God is more completely expressed through the person who lives largely than one who lives meagerly. There is a belief in limitation, a denial that the divine is the center and source of all good. Let me read that again. Fear is a belief in limitation, a denial that the divine is the center and source of all good. He continues, we must do all in our power to overcome it. Now, nobody likes to move beyond their comfort zone. Well, some people do. Some people have that adrenaline rush. But outside the comfort zone, that's where the magic happens. That's where we grow, where we learn and develop in a way that expands our horizons. And if those limiting beliefs hold us back from reaching our full potential, then, well, maybe it's time to challenge and reshape those beliefs. And that's where we come to the transformation. There are transformative effects when embracing new possibilities and shifting one's mindset. Refer to Thomas Troward in his Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science. He said, belief in limitation is the one and only thing that causes limitation, because we thus impress limitation upon the creative principle. And in proportion as we lay that belief aside, our boundaries will expand, and increasing life, more and abundant teaching will be ours. So I've been thinking about what would it look like if I were to walk that talk? What is the thing that makes me uncomfortable, and how can I push past that limitation? How can I embrace the discomfort? Because I recognize that growth lies beyond the boundaries of my comfort zone. So can I embrace that discomfort as a catalyst for change? Can I make a commitment to lean into the unknown, to challenge my fears and push beyond my self-limitations? So what makes me uncomfortable? Well, apparently I don't wrestle with public speaking. They say that public speaking is one of people's greatest fears, which is why at a funeral, most people would rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy. So I thought, well, okay, I have this opportunity to talk to y'all. I might be talking about something uncomfortable. And so if I were to talk about something uncomfortable, what would that be? Well, I don't know about you, but when I was a girl, we didn't discuss money, sex, or politics at the dinner table, or anyone else really. And then it occurred to me the things that I've been avoiding and not wanting to talk about, and that's money. And I'm the treasurer. So it's like that guy whose mother went in to wake her son and tell him it was time to get ready for church. And he replied, I'm not going. And she says, well, why not? Well, I'll give you two reasons. He said, one, they don't like me. And two, I don't like them. And his mother replied, I'll give you two reasons why you should go to church. One, you're 54 years old. And two, you're the pastor. And so that is something I do know about. I can speak from experience about money, even though it's not a comfortable thing. And so that's my most uncomfortable thing. I don't know about you, but like I said, we didn't talk about money it just wasn't something that came up. And well, I was the sixth of eight children. A lot of you know that. My father owned a small construction company, and my mother took care of the kids. And so, with eight kids, you can imagine that they were kind of stretched a little thin, in patience as well as everything else. Um, but every week, they made sure I had 10 cents, one thin dime to put in the offering plate. So even though I didn't learn about money at home, I did learn about stewardship in Sunday school. Now, they didn't say it was about money, but it was definitely about giving. And so I remember the bulletin board with pictures of people in situations where the giving of time, talent, and treasure made a difference. Mrs. Churchill was my teacher. She taught us that even the smallest amount made a difference. And so my one thin dime at that time was important. And so stewardship is that basic understanding that the responsibility for doing what you feel God wants you to do with the resources you've been given. So it's like building a foundation for a future we'll never see. It's like if we think about stewardship of the planet, we think about planting a tree. Not that we'll ever be there when the tree is in its full maturity, but we're planting it for our future. And that's the same thing with stewardship for the center and for anything. Um, but we hardly ever talk about money here at Austin Center for Spiritual Living. It, sometimes we talk about it at the board meeting, but that's kind of a limited group. So, when we do talk about it, we think it's talk about like math or spreadsheets, like it's unemotional. But let me tell you, money is emotional, and changing that isn't easy. Um, but it could be simple. It could be just to start talking about it. And so if we start talking about where we are today and where we want to go, then we start exploring the relationship that we have with money and how we might change that. And if we don't talk about it, nothing changes. That's what I've come to understand. But see, this is what makes me uncomfortable. When you talk about money in church, people are afraid that you're going to talk them into giving something they don't want to give. So there was a young minister just out of seminary decided to take a job on the police force to gain some experience he thought would be useful in his later work. And one of the questions on the oral exam was, well, what would you do to disperse an agitated crowd? His reply, take up a collection. Works every time. But what if I told you that I know a fantastic spiritual practice, a teaching passed down through the millennia, which is the best antidote to depression, cynicism, general malaise? A practice that's transformative, that will connect you to all living things and will offer you a freer heart and boundless joy. You would be begging me to teach you this practice. And what if I told you the practice was tithing? Oh, I know you saw that coming. That's right. The practice of giving a percentage of your material goods back to the religious community, back to the place that supports you. What would you say then? Oh, that reminds me. Pesky squirrels had overrun the town's four churches: Presbyterian, Baptist, Methodist, and Lutheran. So after much consideration, the Presbyterians determined the squirrels were predestined to be there and shouldn't interfere with God's divine will. Okay. In the Baptist church, the squirrels had nested in the baptistry, so the deacons put a lid on it and tried to drown them, but they escaped and kept on multiplying. The Methodists decided they would not harm any of God's creatures, so they humanely trapped the critters and set them free across town. 3 days later, the squirrels were back. The Lutherans, they came up with the best and most effective solution. They baptized the squirrels, made them members of the church, and gave them a copy of the popular tract, Tithing in a Nutshell. You can imagine, the squirrels immediately left for the Methodist church. We could do so much good in the world, and yet we think so small, so afraid that God will ask more than I want to give, even though I know I can't outgive God. So I found this story about the late Danny Thomas. It seems he was out of work, and he and his wife, Rosie, had a baby on the way, and they needed money. And Danny worked at part-time jobs so Rosie could buy groceries. And he also borrowed money from friends. It was a tough time in his life. A week before the baby was born, Danny had the grand total of $7.85 to his name. What would he do? My despair led me to my first exposure to the power of faith, Danny would later recall. On Sunday morning, Danny went to church. But when the offering plate was passed, he put in his usual $1. But something unexpected happened that day. A special missions offering was taken. The priest explained where the mission offering would go, and Danny felt he had to give something. I got carried away, Danny said, and I ended up giving my $7. He'd given away all his money that Sunday. And what in the world had he done? He'd given all his money that Sunday. He walked up to the altar rail, got on his knees, and prayed aloud. Look, I've given my last $7, he prayed. I need it back tenfold because I've got a kid on the way and I have to pay the hospital bill. He went home with a mere 85 cents in his pocket, all the money he had in the world. You won't believe this, Danny Thomas later wrote, but the next morning the phone rang in the rooming house hall. It was a job offer. He was offered part in a commercial. The job wasn't much, but the pay was good, $75. I literally dropped the phone receiver, he remembered. First, I whooped with joy, and then an eerie feeling came over me. He remembered what he'd prayed the day before. The $75 fee, he said, unheard of for me at the time, was almost exactly 10 times the amount of money I had donated to the church. Reverend Scott Aubrey tells us the principle is to give back, to tithe 10% of our time, treasure, talent to the life around us. Why 10%? Well, first of all, 10% is a stretch. Whether we're making $1 million or $1,000 a year, it's a stretch. 10% is a stretch. It gets our attention. We're giving consciously, and our giving has meaning for us. And so as you tithe, you recognize more and more that God is the source. God is the supply. And the supply of all good is infinite, inexhaustible. And so tithing is about acknowledging our source, about being grateful for the goodness of life. An important principle of Islam is that everything belongs to God and that wealth, therefore, is on loan. So Timmy didn't want to put his money in the offering plate on Sunday morning, so his mother decided to use some hurriedly creative reasoning with him. I guess that's what we call it. You don't want that money, honey, she whispered in his ear. Quick, drop it in the plate. It's tainted. Horrified, the little boy obeyed, and after a few seconds he whispered, Mommy, why was the money tainted? Was it dirty? Oh, no, dear, she replied. It's not really dirty. It just tain't yours, tain't mine. She replied, it's God's. So I like to think of the universe as my agent. My agent gets 10%, and I get to keep the 90%. And I give where I'm spiritually fed. I give to the inspiration, to the community, so that this community can grow. Here's the deal. This teaching has served me greatly. I've heard lots of people over the years say it saved their lives. I want to see it not only survive, but to thrive. And we have some work to do here. Getting the word out costs money, time, skill. And I'm thinking about this because I've been working on the 2024 budget for the Austin Center, and it occurred to me, just for fun, okay, well, maybe that's not your idea of fun, but I thought I'd look at the numbers. Look at what it costs every week to bring this service to you. So I added the cost of technology, like Zoom, the website, all those things that we have, our salaries, and miscellaneous other items for the year. And I divided that by 52 weeks. And then I divided that by our average of 20 people for Sunday. Guess what that amount was last year? About $50 a person. And here's the good news. We are a generous people, and several people are giving much, much, much more than that. And plus, we are so benefiting from the additional time, talent, and treasure shared with us. This is such a valuable resource. So whatever we give what we can. And this year we feel confident in bringing Reverend Jean in as a staff minister. We hired Ginny Hancock to do some social media work for us. And we'd like to give Reverend Rainbow a well-deserved raise, which means the budget that I'm presenting to the board later today has a shortfall. And it would be really great if we could raise that money without dipping into our savings. So we're thinking about what fundraisers can we do, what things can we maximize our potential in, and how can we do that? And then I thought, well, here's another way. If you haven't given ACSL a raise in the last few years, maybe now's the time. For example, if you give $20 a week, maybe stretch it to 25. If you give $100 a week, maybe stretch it for an extra 20. You know how it goes? 200, 250. Yeah, I know that's more than 20%. That's more than a 20% raise, but we're worth it. And if you haven't tried tithing, do yourself a favor. Give it a shot. Now, 10 is not the magic number. If you don't want to start with that, then do 5%, do 3%. It doesn't make any difference. The idea is the important thing is the consistency of the givingness, and that your giving is conscious and meaningful. So I ask you to take to heart the words of Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it. The old proverb about the Lord loving a cheerful giver is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean that we should give amount that's easy. It doesn't mean that you should grin and bear it. It means you should give a gift that gladdens your heart, that gives you joy. It means that when we give generously, with authenticity and integrity, the divine moves in us, and the divine moves us to do that. So the question is whether we want to live our lives fearfully, trapped in the consumer mindset of the era, that there's not enough, that I need more, that if I give, I won't have. Or do we want to live a life that is free and just a sense of purpose and wonder? How good does it feel when you give? And what do you want for your legacy? We're in this together. Let us share from the abundance we've already been given. And so let us take that idea into our meditation treatment today. Let's begin at the beginning, knowing there's one power, one presence, one infinite source, one divine source. Everything we have comes from that source. It has created us out of itself. It has created everything that exists out of itself, out of that nothingness that is everything. And so as I imagine the most expansive thing that I can imagine, it is greater than that. And it is closer than hands and feet. It is the beat of the heart. It is each breath. And so recognizing that one power presence, recognizing that I am created in, as, and of that it is working for me right in this very moment. And this is true for each and every person here. There is no one that is outside of that law of divine life. And knowing this, I know and accept for the Austin Center for Spiritual Living that we are prosperous, beyond belief. That there is more than enough that we have to give, to share, to do what we want to in the world, to make this world a better place for everyone, to spread this teaching. And I know that's true for each and every person, that this is a prosperous universe, and that each person has been given that gift of life itself. And in this gift of life, there is perfect health. There is a divine pattern for perfect health, and it is absolutely operating through, in, and as each one, with each cell in every body knowing exactly what its job is, doing it absolutely perfectly with divine intelligence, simply manifesting in perfect right order, in divine right timing. I know this is also true for creative expression in the world. No matter what that creative expression is, it is a divine gift. And as we use the skills and talents we've been given, we make this world a better place simply by being. And I give thanks for this. And I give thanks also for the love that we share in this life with friends, with family, with that special someone. This Valentine's Day week, we're especially focused on love. And so, whether that be love for family, love for pets, love for the world, love for the trees, it is the love that's first been given to us. So we openly receive that love and we give that love. This is the law of circulation. And so, knowing this to be the case, I am in awe and gratitude. And in my gratitude, knowing that it's already perfect, whole, and complete, I rest. All is well. I invite you to join me in affirming this by saying together, and so it is.